Continue learning the Maamar. We're learning on Shlach. So we're holding in the middle of the Sif, talking about what is the idea of the sending the Meraglim, why Moshe thought it was a good idea, and why were the Meraglim against going into Eretz Yisroel. So it says, "Vapiza yuva gam miles avoidus b'knisas b'nei Yisrael Eretz Yisroel gabe avedasim b'yosim emidbar." Based on what we explained before about the idea of mitzvos maisius, like we said, there's a difference between the way the mitzvahs are performed by the tzaddikim that are called leviosam, that's always ruchnius, and the way the ikr mitzvah is done through mitzvah maisius, which is like the shor habor. So we understand why it was important to go into Eretz Yisrael versus remain in the midbar. When the Jewish people in the desert, they lived a life when they had man from heaven, bread from heaven. The water is provided to them by God through the special miraculous well of Miriam. It traveled with them. That's not regular, that's not typical, that's miraculous. Their clothing as well, Shehem Davar Nifrat, even something that was their clothing which wasn't them. The clouds would clean and press them. So they had in-house traveling dry cleaners. And even more miraculous, that the clothing were cleaned and pressed, but they growed with them. A person never had to change their clothing. If you were born as an infant or a young person, and as you grew older or larger, what have you, your clothing grew with you. So again, everything was miraculous. The fact that their soul was growing with them in their spiritual growth. Therefore, their physical body was growing with their soul. Garment also caused automatically that even their garments, in the physical sense, grew with them. Although the clothing weren't part of them. Nevertheless, miraculously grew with them. Meaning to say they didn't have to worry about anything physical, material. So therefore, in the what they focused on was the thought and speech. They were either thinking Torah or talking Torah and the mitzvahs in a way of talking and thinking. They didn't have to go and create the maisa, the action, with the availability for the action. Go get money to build a sukkah, go buy the wood, go and find the esrog to buy, or get the flour so you can make matzah. There's a letter from the Rebbe that he sends in the early years of his leadership, and I think it's 60. So the Tafshin Pei, between Pei and Pei Zayin, before he was sent to prison for Yid Bestamas, which is actually Tesvav of Sivan, is when the Rebbe was imprisoned and he was released on the 12th of Nisan of Tammuz. So there's a letter that Friedrich was asking for 2 bags of flour and how it should be sent to Russia in a way that it be extended not to his address but to the municipality's address or the administrator's address. So the idea was not that he was trying to smuggle in flour, he just didn't want them to open it, because if they would open it, they can make the flour chametz. So he wanted it in a way that it should be able to preserve its packing. So it shouldn't be a question of the flour becoming unqualified to lose its qualification for the ability to make matzahs, because there would be shmura. So here you're talking about 2 bags of flour, the effort the Frierdiker Rebbe had to go to get 2 bags of flour. That's not big bags. It seemed like Maamar to make a few matzahs. So the Midbar didn't deal with these things. He didn't have to find the Gashmias, the Metzias, the Maisa to be able to do the Maisa mitzvahs. They lived a life of thought and speech, which was concepts, but not the actual mitzvah. Like the Rebbe Rashab says about the shivcha that has the taina, that how could it be that the shivcha was trying to figure out if she was in a chrefes, if she was half married, the one she had relations, and she's trying to figure out does she get malchus, doesn't get malchus, so she has to claim her case to court. And here the Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel are arguing, this is what she meant, that's what she meant, she could have argued this, she could have argued that. How she can ever figure out what Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel are trying to figure out what she's going to argue about. The difference is because they were talking theory, and to her it made a difference. Her life depended on it. So too over here, when we're talking about theoretical Torah mitzvahs, but here, even if it's ruchnius, it doesn't get down to the Maisa, and the Maisa actually schleps down, brings down a higher level of ability to focus and brain power, because it matters to you in the physical sense. It was only machshav be'inin hamidbar. Sorry, that the idea of midbar, the word midbar is from the lashon dibur, which means it was only about speech. Like it says midvar chanava, which is talking about the midbar, is beautiful. It's also dvar words. Nice words. She mitzvahs talmud Torah. She ikra b'pet. It's primarily the dealt with learning Torah. Maamar zal a pasuk chaim hem lemoitzeyehem b'pet, that you have to speak Torah out with your mouth, but that's mouth. It's not action. It's action of the mouth, but it's not action of to engage in physical things. But when they came to the land, they had to perform the actual mitzvah, and not just that you had estrogens growing from the tree. You had to plant the tree with estrogens to make sure it's not morkov, and find the right hadas and lulav and the wood for the matzah and the wool and the flour for Pesach, which is much higher than just the speech and theory. So, but how is it possible that you could be able to penetrate the mice, penetrate the action, that in your actions, that every way that you become the possibility? See, a person could sit like Rabbi Shimon, not to put it down, but you're sitting in a cave and you're doing the mitzvah theoretically, or ruchnis. Is here you have to acquire the mice and then be able to turn that action, that gashmis, into something holy. Where do you get the power to do that? So you have to have an sinis koach ma'ali. You have to have a strength from above. In general, everything we need Eibusher's help. So this is aside from the general help you need from Hashem to help a person battle through the Yetzer Hara. When you have avoida, so the ability to get through past your struggles, so to say, your Yetzer Hara, Eibusher helps you, God helps you. To overcome the obstacles. Aside for that, Rebbe says, just to be able to actually accomplish what you need to accomplish, not because of the obstacles. How could you turn something gashmis into something holy? That itself needs a special empowerment from above, that you could actually penetrate the gashmis, which was created for 2,000 years before then. It was just the gashmis. You weren't able to. Avraham Avinu wasn't able to do that. So how could the Jewish people do that? You needed you needed power. You needed empowering. And that the Eibush not only that when we do that, when we get that empowerment, so then we could make an effort from below that's going to get a response from above. Right? Then you could even get higher. So where does the whole thing start? Our ability to start to do a mitzvah, through the mitzvah to trigger a Sirus Leila. It's all you have to have an empowerment from above. So the Rebbe is going to say that's the idea of Yishlach Moshe. That's why God says to Moshe, Shlach Lecha. Send the spies, because they need the empowerment of Moshe Rabbeinu. There's something great that's going to happen over here. We're seeing that what the Rebbe is getting at is that sending of the spies was not just the sending of the spies. There was something much bigger than that. It was the ability to the examination of conquering Gashmis. And the question is what level of Gashmis were they able to conquer? That's why there's a difference between the spies of Moshe and the spies of Yehoshua. Moshe wanted the person to be able to conquer maybe not the land of 10, the 7 nations that are not given to us until Mashiach comes, which is to totally conquer our machshav, our chacham biradas. But our emotions, we should be able to conquer. The land of 7 represents Zayin Midos. And Moshe wanted not just that we should conquer our machshav, our behavior, but actually change our character. And for that, you need tremendous koyach from above. These 3 levels. Number 1 is an empowerment from above. Like we always know that's one of the rules of Chassidus, that there's an Esrus Leila, there's an awakening from above that triggers that our avoid is possible on different levels. Like we have Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li, right? I'm to my beloved and my beloved's for me. But nevertheless, the Rebbe explains that even I'm to my beloved and my beloved's to me. It means we start with avoid and God responds. Is because Melech Masada. That's the empowerment from above. God creates the environment that we should be able to create on either daily. So to over here, the idea that there's a Nesinas Koyach, that we should be able to actually penetrate the Gashmis, that's step number one. Avoid the Atzma, avoid of turning, now that we've been empowered, now you're avoided to go make it Gashmis into something Ruchnius. And then the response that God has when we do a mitzvah ma'aseh that davka. We find this idea, these three stages of the avoid of the person and the response of the Eibush, that comes with this data. We find it in different levels, and the Rebbe is going to go now to explain all the levels where we find these three stages. In Torah itself, we find these three levels. God looks in the Torah and creates the world. So even the idea of giving an Nesinas Koyach has to come from Torah. We find this idea of these three stages in Torah. What are we talking about? There's three ways we could describe our relationship to Torah. There's Yerusha, which is an inheritance, i.e., you didn't do anything to earn an inheritance. You were born, and based on that itself, you would deserve to be a Yerush. There's V'yagia, there's effort. That person was born to toil. And then there's the level of matana, the gift. A gift is not a Yerusha. A gift, you don't have to give a gift. It's someone who you give an inheritance to, you're not necessarily going to gift. And not someone who is going to be getting a gift. It's someone who's worthy of an inheritance. We have one verse that talks about Torah. It says it's Merasha. That's Shatayru Hi B'chinis Yerusha. Merasha is a language of Yerusha, of inheritance. Then we find the verse between the Gamshlim and Torah we find verses that talks about the person's efforts. Like it says, Haskin, Atzmacha Lumutarish, and Yerushalach. This is literally a mission that says, prepare yourself to study Torah. That's not a Yerusha, that's inheritance. You have to work on it. So that's a second level of Torah. We find the level of the expression of gift. Like it says, here go the word matan Torah itself is the word is called a gift. Moshe learns Torah and he forgot it. It was given it again as a matana. So you find the high level of matana. Again, we're going to explain that the idea of matana usually means a gift. Even though someone gifts someone, so by definition, it's not pay. There's no payment required. But there's a question. There's a toivus hano. Means a person gifts someone because there's certain pleasure I get to gift you. I get a pleasure. A person wouldn't gift unless there's some pleasure. The pleasure that Abishur gets is from our avoid, and therefore he gives us. That's the Shlach Lecha Anashim that comes after the Yegia, which comes after the Yerusha. Ideas like this. Yesh be'inyan Torah. I have to finish this, just the sif, and then we have to stop. But it says, we find Yesh be'inyan Torah shehi ba'oven shel Yerusha. Just by being a Jew, a descendant of Avram Yitzchak, we have Torah on the level of Yerusha. That there's 600, that the Yisrael is the Rosh Tevis. Yesh Yisrael, Yesh Shishim Reish Riboy Oasis the Torah. That's Yisrael. That there's 600,000 letters in the Torah, not exact letters. There's letters and silent letters and regular letters, but there's altogether, if you would use letters as vowels, you have 600,000 corresponding to the 600,000 descendants of Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. Each person has their letter that they're connected to. And even though there's more than Baruch Hashem 600,000 Jews, but there's generally known as 600,000 general souls. So even if there's your sub-soul, but you're getting through your letter, which is in Torah, that's Yerusha. You didn't work on it because you have a letter. And then we find the idea of effort. There has to be toiling in Torah. The things that you could reach through toiling. God wants us to toil. There's certain things that a shver taisvis, a hard mimer, a hard Indian that you have to push it, learn, and break your head, not just to read it casual reading. They actually want you to read Yegia, efforts in Torah. And this is the gift of Torah. So like Moshe learned very hard the Torah, he forgot it, then he was given it again as a gift. What does it mean, a gift? Why do you have to be gifted if you have toiling? Because you could toil up to such a point. But then Hashem says, oh, I see the person tried so hard and toiled, I'm going to give him or her more than the effort. That's the gift part. The Rebbe says in another Maamar on Shavuos, the idea of Eyas Le'amay, the idea of Torah being a gift, a pleasure, delight. By through a person learning Torah, you're able to get the delight of the essential delight of Hashem. The delight of the king Batzmusi and in his essence. That's the gift. That's the gift that's been given to a person when you toil, because God is delighted with our efforts in Torah. To reach the delight of Torah, you can only get as a gift. But you're not worthy of the gift. It's not like payment for the gift, because always there's different times we explain this Jerusalem. Sometimes Jerusalem means an awakening from above, or a response from above according to our efforts. But then there's also even beyond our effort. But there has to be at least efforts. You have to put a finger, something. You have to try as much as you can, but even though the gifts can be much more than what you've tried. A person won't give a gift unless he has neichen. He has a pleasure from it. There's something that you're doing, that there's some relationship you have. It's not about Yerusha, but there's something that's in this happening that is why I'm decided to give to you, right? Because first, when a person reaches the levels you could reach through toiling, then you're gifted with the gift of Torah. From this one understand, when a person learns Torah, God sits opposite the person who learns. Then we find another expression, that the day is divided into, the Gemara says the day is divided into 12 hours. There's always 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night. The question is how many minutes in an hour if it's a winter summer. But there's always 12 hours, so you divide it by 12. The first 3 hours God sits and learns Torah. Second 3 hours he judges. The third 3 hours he provides. The fourth 3 hours it's a time of delight. What's this what's the 3 hours different than God sitting opposite a person? God's always sitting opposite the student, the person who's learning. So what's this 3 hours that God's learning? God sitting opposite you is the level of a person's effort. The first 3 hours that God, so to say, learning by himself. That's the level of the gift. It's everything the Eibush that we know about the Eibush is connected to the Jewish people. So the Hashem's learning alone, so to say, is the learning that's not opposite the person in the person's effort. And that's gifted to a person after they've given their effort. That's why it's called the first 3 hours. The first 3 levels of pleasure, meaning keser, chachma bina, within the keser, within the light, the tainig of Hashem. We can't reach that. Can't reach the depth of God's delight. How do we get to God's delight? It's only as a gift after we put in our own efforts. And let's just do one more sif. Shame. I mean, there's too much. I'm going to take this Maamar into next week as well. Just like Torah has these 3 levels of Yerusha, Yigia, Matana. So too in the mitzvos. That God, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessing Hashem, the King of the universe. The Rebbe explains that b'shem kvod tzad mezakim name the Alter Rebbe shalikimu lashon koyach. God, the name Elikim is God's is the expression of strength. V'avaya lekenu. What does it mean that Hashem our strength? Hanu shavayu kochenu v'chayusenu. God is our strength in our life, vitality. Meaning zehu anisnis koyach al mitzvos. So by God being our chayis means it gives us the strength that we should perform a mitzvah. She'enu asher k'shanu mitzvah. But through a mitzvah we can become sanctified. And you take the physical body, to be turned into something holy. And that's why we have to make a mitzvah, a bracha for a mitzvah before we do the mitzvah. Then it's actually doing the mitzvah. Is that the bracha is the empowerment. like the Yerusha. Then there's the actual Avodah, which is the Agia. Who was when we do the mitzvah, we get a response from Hashem. The reward of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. Means that what we do with the mitzvah is by getting a mitzvah, we have this awakening from above. That's a response to the mitzvah. That's the reward of the mitzvah. The best, the highest level of the mitzvah is the mitzvah itself. What does it mean, the mitzvah itself? Because via the mitzvah, you become, the word for mitzvah means to connect. With the one who commanded us to do the mitzvahs, and the one who has a desire for us to be doing these mitzvahs. All right. Thank you for joining. We'll continue the Maamar next time we're available.